My name is Lorraine Whitman, and the day my son threatened me was the day I realized silence wasn't protecting anyone anymore. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. He said it so calmly I almost didn't believe what I'd heard. If you ever tell anyone what really happened to Dad, I'll make you regret it. He stood across from me in the kitchen, one hand resting on the countertop, the other clenched at his side. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lunge. But his words were heavier than anything that had ever hit me. The clock ticked on the wall. The kettle hissed behind me. And my son, the same boy I once cradled with lullabies and patched up knees, looked at me like I was a threat. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't breathe. We stood in that terrible silence until he finally turned and left the room. The front door slammed a second later. The sound echoed through the house like the crack of a gun. I sat down at the kitchen table. My hands shook. My legs were weak. I hadn't felt that kind of fear since the day his father died. But it was different now, because this fear didn't come from the man I once married. It came from the son we had created. Let me back up. Ethan is 26, strong-willed, bright, with a kind of charisma that disarms people. He's got his father's jawline and my eyes. He's always been proud of that. Always asked about the man whose face he sees in the mirror every morning. I told him his father died in an accident. That's what everyone believed. He was found dead near a construction site, blunt force trauma late at night. No witnesses. Police ruled it an accident, a drunken fall. Closed the case in a week. But it wasn't an accident. I know, because I was there. Because I killed him. And for 24 years, I've lived in a quiet prison of my own making. I didn't mean to. I didn't plan it. But when you've been cornered for long enough, when you've had bruises hidden under sleeves and promises broken behind every door, something in you hardens. And when that man came at me one final time, eyes wild, hands ready to bruise, I pushed back. Harder than I meant to. The brick was meant to scare him, not end him. But it did. And when I saw him lying there, blood trickling from his temple, something in me broke, and something else took over. The part that knew no one would believe a woman with a history of emotional instability, and a man who meant well, but drank too much. So I staged it. I dragged him outside. I made it look like he'd fallen near the pit at the construction site where he sometimes went to sleep off his binges. And the police bought it. Case closed. And I closed off too. I raised Ethan on my own. Gave him everything I could. Kept the truth sealed like poison in a bottle I prayed he'd never open. I thought I was doing the right thing. Shielding him. Protecting him from the legacy of violence that ran through his father's blood. But the past has a way of surfacing, especially when it's buried inside your own child. The signs started showing up years ago. The temper. The outbursts. The silence after the rage, like even he didn't know what lived inside him. And now this. A threat. Directed at me. Because he'd found something. I didn't know what yet, but I could feel it in his voice. That coiled accusation. That fury wrapped in disappointment. And underneath it, fear. Fear that the man he'd idolized was not a myth, but a monster. I got up slowly from the table, walked to the sink, and stared out the window at the backyard. The same yard where Ethan once ran through sprinklers and dug holes for worms. Now it felt like a graveyard. And maybe it was just not for a body, for the life we once had. I spent that night turning over every hiding place in my head. The attic, the crawl space behind the garage, the linen closet where I kept that shoebox of newspaper clippings I hadn't looked at in over a decade. Had he found it? Did I leave something out? I checked the hallway drawer. The folders were there. Court orders, emergency room records, photos I had never shown anyone, not even myself. Still hidden, still sealed. But something was wrong. I could feel it in the air. Like the house had exhaled a secret I didn't mean for it to share. I went to bed that night knowing one thing for sure. Whatever Ethan had uncovered, it had changed something inside him. And if I didn't act soon, if I didn't choose to speak first, he would be the one to decide what our truth looked like. And I didn't know if I would survive it. Ethan has always worn grief like armor. Not loud, not theatrical, but reverent, quiet, controlled. The way some men carry religion in their fists and photographs in their wallets. He kept a framed picture of his father on his nightstand until he was 22, the one I gave him when he was 10. A cropped photo. From a rare beach day, his father in sunglasses holding Ethan at his hip, both of them smiling. In that frozen frame, we looked like a family. In that frozen frame, no one could see the bruise on my thigh from the night before. When he was little, Ethan asked about his dad every few weeks. Where did he go to school? What was his favorite food? Did he ever play football? I told him enough to keep the fantasy alive. Your dad was brave. He worked hard. He loved you very much. All technically true, but truth, when cut to size and polished, becomes its own kind of lie. As Ethan got older, he stopped asking. Started filling in the blanks himself. He built his father from scraps, photos, vague memories, stories he invented in his own head. And I let him, because I thought a beautiful fiction was safer than a violent truth. But now I'm not sure, because Ethan's grief, the kind that shaped his loyalty to a man he barely knew, has turned into something sharper. Something like anger in search of a target. And now I know what that target is. Me. The day after the threat, he came home late. I was sitting on the couch pretending to read. The TV played quietly in the background, some old black and white detective movie. I didn't look up when he walked in, but I felt him pause in the doorway. I found your file cabinet key, he said flatly. I looked up slowly. My heart dropped. What were you looking for? I asked. He didn't answer. He walked over, dropped a manila folder on the coffee table. It slid across the wood like a guillotine. You lied to me, he said. I didn't touch it. Inside, I knew what he'd found. Court transcripts, ER admission sheets, photographs, the autopsy report. Where did you get this? I asked. Garage crawl space, behind the insulation. Of course. I hid it in the one place he was always too afraid of when he was a child. Did you read all of it? I asked quietly. I read enough. He didn't yell, didn't cry. That's what terrified me most. I know about the bruises, he said, about the police reports, the restraining order. Why didn't you ever tell me? My voice barely came out. Because I didn't want you to think he didn't love you. Did he? Ethan asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I don't know, I said honestly. He nodded as if he expected that. I loved him, I added. That got his attention. He looked at me, his face unreadable. I loved him so much I almost forgot who I was, I said. And by the time I remembered, it was too late. He sat down across from me, the folder still between us. You said it was an accident. It was, I said, in the most complicated way possible. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he wasn't just abusive to you. It wasn't a question. I stared at him. You remember I asked? He nodded slowly. I remember him yelling, he said. The way you'd flinch. I remember hiding in the closet once when he smashed a lamp. Tears pricked my eyes. You were 5. I remember everything he said. And then finally I saw the pain underneath the mask. I built him into someone I could admire, Ethan said. Because if I didn't, I was afraid of what that made me. You're not him. I don't know that. I do. He stood up, started pacing. I've felt it, Mom. The rage. The thing that makes you want to break something just to feel alive. I swallowed. That's not him inside you. That's pain. It only turns into him if you stop facing it. He turned to me, eyes full of fire and something else. Shame. You should have told me, he said again, before I had to dig for it. I was afraid. Of what? That you'd hate me for surviving him. The silence was sharp. Then with a quiet edge, I don't hate you. But I don't know if I trust you either. And he left. Again. That night, I opened the folder. I hadn't touched it in years. It smelled like the past old paper and rusted fear. On the last page, there was a sticky note I had forgotten. One I wrote to myself years ago. Don't let him grow up inside the shadow of another man. Give him the sun, even if it scorches you. And suddenly, I understood. Maybe the scorch was never mine to endure forever. Maybe it was time to tell Ethan everything, before silence made him inherit something even darker than the truth. The night after Ethan confronted me, I couldn't sleep. I moved from bed to window to kitchen and back again, pacing like an animal trapped in its own den. The house so quiet for so long felt different now, not just because of what had been said, but because I could feel something shifting, like the house itself was starting to hum. The next morning, I went into the garage. The crawl space behind the insulation had always been my hiding place, not just for documents, but for anything that carried memory, old photos, taped interviews from the court-appointed therapist, even the burner phone I'd once used to call the shelter in secret. But that morning, I noticed something else. The floor was dusty, except for a set of footprints. I knelt down and saw the insulation had been torn back, sloppily, like someone had rushed. In the corner, 2 bricks had been moved. He'd been here, and he hadn't put anything back. My stomach sank. I opened the small lockbox tucked behind the pipe, the one Ethan hadn't found. Inside were 3 old cassette tapes, my voice recorded during the custody hearings. I hadn't listened to them in years. I didn't want to. The woman on those tapes wasn't someone I liked remembering. She was scared, disoriented, ashamed of being weak. But she'd told the truth. One of the tapes was labeled in red July 6, 1999, emergency session. That was the day after I ran. The day I showed up at my caseworker's office with a swollen jaw and Ethan asleep in the back seat of the car. The memory came rushing back, me clutching a bag with diapers and a cracked photo frame, begging for someone to believe me. I never meant for Ethan to hear those tapes. But now I wondered, what if he already had? That night, I checked his room. He wasn't home. I wasn't snooping, not in the usual sense. I was searching. Desperate. I opened his closet, checked under the bed, even looked inside the old toy chest he still used for storage. That's when I heard it. A click from under the floorboards. His room was above the garage, and there, near the corner, one of the boards was slightly raised. I lifted it. Inside was a small velvet bag, and inside the bag was the pocket knife. His father's. Black handle, initials scratched into the side, DW. I hadn't seen that knife in over 20 years. I thought I'd thrown it out. It had been in his jeans the night he died. I remembered pulling it out of his pocket, shaking as I tried to think. Do I leave it? Do I plant it? Do I say he attacked me? In the end, I didn't need it. But I couldn't destroy it either. I hid it away, the one object that felt like a totem of his rage. And now, Ethan had it. I sat back on my heels. The floor around me felt colder, the room darker. This wasn't just about what he knew. It was about what he was carrying. I replaced everything, put the board back, and returned to the hallway. I stood outside his door waiting. 2 hours later, he came home. He walked past me without a word. Ethan, I called after him. He paused. His shoulders stiffened. You went back to the crawl space, I said. He didn't turn around. You lied to me my whole life. I kept you alive, I said softly. Now he turned. What else are you hiding? He demanded. I hesitated. You found the documents. What more do you need? He stepped forward, voice low and shaking. I need to know if I'm like him. That question again. Like a prayer. Like a curse. You're not, I said. Then why does it feel like I am? His eyes were glassy, not with tears, with fury. Why do I dream about hitting people? He said. Why do I scare myself sometimes when I look in the mirror? I swallowed. Because you've seen pain, and no one taught you what to do with it. You should have taught me. I nodded. I should have. The air between us was unbearable. Then softly I said I found the knife. His face fell. I thought I could understand him, he whispered. I thought if I held something that was his, I could feel less lost. But that thing I said, it cut deeper than anything he ever said. You don't need to hold it to remember. You need to let it go. He looked at me, and for the first time in days, his face broke. He looked young again. I'm scared, he admitted. I know. He didn't cry, but he handed me the velvet bag. I held it in both hands. It felt heavier than I remembered. The box wasn't where I'd left it. It was a weathered cedar chest, small no more than the length of my arms, with a rusted brass latch and worn edges. I'd kept it in the back of the garage attic, buried under old winter clothes, plastic bins full of baby clothes, and forgotten Christmas lights. For years, it had been just another part of the house, another secret that blended into the clutter of life, until it wasn't there. It took me 3 trips up the attic ladder before I accepted it was truly gone. My chest felt tight. I checked every corner of the attic, every bin, every coat pocket. Nothing. The next day, I found it in Ethan's trunk. Uncovered, unlocked, wide open. He hadn't even tried to hide the fact that he'd found it. It was as if he wanted me to know. Inside, the contents were jumbled. Newspaper articles, some yellowed, folded with angry edges. Legal transcripts from court hearings where I was asked to describe incidents in front of strangers. A torn photo of Ethan at 4 years old, his arm around a man who had already been spiraling. One cassette cracked on the corner labeled "Police Interview, July 8th. And in the center of it all, a small notebook. My handwriting. A journal I'd started when I was preparing to leave his father. The first entry read, "If something happens to me, someone needs to know who he really was. If this book is ever read by Ethan, please forgive me." My knees nearly gave out. I sat down on the garage step, that old journal in my lap, the world outside too bright and far away. He had read it. He had seen every page, every private fear, every apology I'd scribbled in the margins like penance. The night he broke my wrist. The time he threatened to drive off the road with Ethan in the car. The nights I stood between them, praying the sound of fists on walls would never reach my son's ears. He had read all of it, and he still threatened me. That was what broke me. It wasn't the threat itself. It was knowing that the truth I had buried for his sake had become the very weapon he now used to control me. That evening, Ethan returned home, keys jingling like nothing had happened. He found me in the kitchen journal on the table, open. "You found it," he said flatly. "You wanted me to," I said. He nodded. "I needed to know. You could have asked. You would have lied." I took a deep breath. Not anymore. He sat across from me, arms crossed. "Why now?" I asked. "Why search after all these years?" He stared at the journal. "Because something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "I've been having dreams. Memories. I thought they were just made up like dreams usually are. But reading this..." He tapped the notebook. "It made those fragments feel real." "What fragments?" He looked up, and for a moment he looked terrified. "I remember seeing blood. I remember hiding under the sink. I remember your voice screaming. But not words, just sound. Then silence." I felt my breath catch. I thought I made that up. Until I saw the date in the journal. July 5th. "That's when you wrote about the night you almost didn't survive." I nodded. "That's the night I knew I had to leave, or I'd be gone before your 7th birthday." He swallowed, hard. "I wanted him to be a hero," he whispered. "All my life. I thought, if I made him into something beautiful, I'd stop feeling so broken." "You were never broken," I said. "But you were lied to. By me. By silence. By what we both needed to believe just to survive." He looked at me, eyes rimmed red but dry. "I'm angry," he said. "I know. Mostly at you." I nodded again. "I deserve that. But also at him," he added. "Because he left me this mess of a legacy. And now I have to figure out what to do with it." We sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked, "Why didn't you just tell me you killed him?" I met his eyes. "Because I didn't want that to be the first story you remembered your father by. And now it's the only one I'll never forget." I didn't try to argue, because he was right. That's the cruelty of truth. It's a surgical blade. It cuts clean, but it still leaves a scar. A son's loyalty, a mother's fear. I used to believe there was a version of motherhood where love could outmatch anything, anger, trauma, even blood. That if I loved Ethan hard enough, if I made the world soft around him, I could scrub out the parts of his father I didn't want to see reflected in him. But you can't outlove what someone's determined to inherit. And when a son believes he was betrayed not just by history, but by his own mother's silence, he becomes someone else. someone I wasn't ready to face. Ethan wouldn't look at me for 2 days after the garage conversation. We passed like shadows in the hallway, shared the same table in utter silence. The house became a waiting room, but the tension was alive. I heard him at night pacing opening drawers, rustling paper. One night he stayed in the garage until nearly 2 a.m. When I crept to the hallway and looked through the window, I saw him sitting on the cement floor with every document laid out around him like a crime scene. Except I was the one on trial. I could see it in his eyes. He was building a case against me, and I was terrified he'd win. The fifth morning after the discovery, he finally spoke. I was in the kitchen cracking eggs into a bowl when he walked in. "I called Uncle Darren," he said, leaning against the doorway like he was announcing the weather. My heart stopped. Darren was my late husband's brother, estranged, bitter, and quiet as a snake in tall grass. He was the only person who had ever hinted at what my husband was capable of, and also the only person who told me to keep quiet if I wanted to stay out of prison. "What did he say?" I asked carefully. "That you disappeared. With me. No explanation. And that Dad wasn't the man you made him out to be." I dropped the whisk. Yolk and shell splattered across the counter. Ethan didn't flinch. "He said you were always dramatic," Ethan added. "That you exaggerated things. That maybe you even imagined some of it." I leaned against the counter, wiped my hands with a towel that was suddenly too damp to be helpful. "He never saw what your father was like behind closed doors," I said. "Maybe no one did." He said it like a challenge, like bait. I took it anyway. "Are you saying I made it up?" My voice cracked. "That I bruised myself? That I faked the ER visits, lied under oath?" "I don't know," he exploded, slamming his hand on the doorframe. "That's the problem, Mom. I don't know what's true anymore. You kept all of this from me for decades. Now I'm supposed to just believe your version like gospel." I stepped forward. "You think I wanted to carry this? You think I wanted to wake up every day and pretend your father was something he wasn't, just so you could grow up without knowing how bad it got?" His chest was heaving, his jaw clenched. "I think you should have trusted me." I looked away. "Would you have believed me at 14, when boys your age still thought their fathers walked on water?" He hesitated. "You idolized him, Ethan," I said, my voice lowering. "I didn't want to take that from you. I knew the truth would kill that dream, and I wasn't ready to be the executioner." His lips parted like he wanted to speak, but nothing came. So I went on. "There's loyalty," I said, "and then there's legacy. You don't owe your father anything just because his blood runs in your veins. And you don't owe me blind forgiveness either. But don't stand there pretending the truth is suddenly negotiable just because it's ugly." He stood still, his shadow tall across the tile. Then quietly, "You think I'm like him?" It wasn't a question. I shook my head. "No, but I think you're afraid you could be." He dropped his eyes, and there it was again, that fragile flicker behind the anger. Not hatred, not resentment, but grief. Grief for the father he thought he knew. Grief for the childhood that now seemed retroactively rewritten. And maybe, grief for the man he could have become if I'd just told him sooner. Later that night, I found something in the trash can outside. It was the photo. The one Ethan had kept on his nightstand for years, the beach picture with his father holding him, both of them laughing at some forgotten moment. Ripped clean down the middle. My husband's half was crumpled and torn again into strips. Ethan's half remained creased, yes, but intact. I held it in my hands like a fragile artifact. My son wasn't just angry, he was dismantling his mythos. Piece by painful piece. And I didn't know if I should feel relieved or horrified. The next morning, Ethan came to the breakfast table with a question I didn't expect. "Did he hurt anyone else?" I looked up from my coffee. "What do you mean?" "Dad, were there other women?" I thought for a moment. "One, before me. I met her once long after he and I were together. She had a scar on her arm and wouldn't look me in the eye." "What happened to her?" "She left. Changed her name. I heard she remarried and moved out of state." He nodded slowly. "I want to talk to her." I set my cup down. "Ethan, I need to know how far this goes," he said. "If I'm going to understand him, I need the full picture." I hesitated. That path doesn't always lead to peace. It might lead to something else, he said. Truth. And just like that, I saw it. My son wasn't threatening me anymore. He was testing me. Testing whether I'd finally stand beside him in the truth, even if it meant uncovering things I had fought to keep buried. Even if it meant he wouldn't like what he found. So I gave him the name. The old case file with the witness statements, the interview recordings. The letter she wrote to the court begging them not to send my husband to prison, but also begging for someone to believe her. I gave it all to him, because maybe the only way for Ethan to not become his father was to see the man for everything he was. Not just the monster, but the manipulator, the charmer, the broken boy who became a dangerous man. And maybe in doing so, Ethan could see the difference between inheriting a history and repeating it. I always believed the house had a certain rhythm at night, the way the stairs creaked after midnight, the refrigerator's sighs, the hum of the street lamp outside Ethan's window casting slow-moving shadows on the hallway wall. After years of living alone, these sounds became a kind of lullaby proof that nothing was lurking, that I was safe. But the night after Ethan asked for her name, that woman from the case files, something felt off. There was no creak of stairs, no television hum from Ethan's room, just stillness. The kind that swells. Around 2:17 a.m. I heard it, a soft pop, followed by a slow hiss. I slipped out of bed and stepped toward the window. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's cat again, but then I saw the driveway. Both of my car's front tires, flattened, slashed, not punctured, not deflated from age slashed. A sick ripple went through my spine. I wrapped my robe tighter around myself and stared into the dark. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rubber. I turned from the window and made my way down the stairs barefoot, my feet silent against the wood floor. Ethan's door was open. His bed was empty. The sheets still held the impression of him, but the room was cold. My heart was a drumbeat. "Ethan," I whispered. No answer. I crept through the house, checking each room. The back door was unlocked, slightly ajar. Outside the yard was quiet, but a faint light glowed from the garage. I crossed the lawn, each step slower than the last. The air was colder than it should have been in late spring. The garage door creaked when I pushed it. And there he was, sitting cross-legged in the center of the garage floor, surrounded by papers. The pocket knife lay open beside him. He didn't look up. "You're bleeding," I said quietly. He glanced at his palm. There was a small nick, the kind that comes from flicking a blade too hard. "I wanted to see how sharp it still was," he said. I stepped closer. "Why did you do it?" He tilted his head. "Do what?" "My tires." He finally looked at me. "You think I'd do that?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I don't know what you're capable of." His expression changed. Not to anger, but something worse. Disappointment. "That's fair," he said. "I don't know either." I sat across from him, knees aching. For a moment, we just breathed. "I thought maybe hurting something would help me feel less full," he said. "Full of what?" "Pressure, rage, shame, all of it." His fingers trembled slightly as he folded one of the police transcripts. "When you told me about Dad, part of me wanted to thank you," he admitted. "For surviving. For protecting me. But I asked. But another part of me hated you," he whispered. "For keeping it from me. For letting me love a ghost." I nodded. "You have every right to feel that." He closed his eyes. "Sometimes I hear his voice in my head. But it's mine now. It's my voice yelling like he used to. It scares me, Mom. It really does." I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I once stood in this garage," I said, "just after he died. I stood right where you are holding that same knife. And I thought if anyone ever knew what I did, they'd think I was a monster." He looked at me. "Were you—" "No," I said. "I was a mother. A scared, cornered, desperate mother who had 5 seconds to decide between silence and survival." He swallowed hard. "I understand that now," he said. "That night I found the box. I wasn't just looking for answers. I was looking for permission. To be angry," I asked. "To be free of him," he said. A long silence followed. Then he added, "But I didn't slash your tires." I believed him. Maybe because he didn't try to defend himself. Maybe because I wanted to. "Then who did I?" whispered. He picked up a page, a hospital report detailing my broken wrist. Maybe someone else who didn't want the past opened again. The next morning, I filed a police report. Not because I thought they'd do anything they wouldn't. Vandalism in our neighborhood wasn't new, but because I needed the act on record. I needed a paper trail, just in case. Ethan stayed home that day. He didn't say much, but his presence was different. Softer, less guarded. I caught him flipping through an old photo album, the one I thought I'd hidden. He lingered on a picture of his 5th birthday. Balloons, cake, a crooked smile. In the corner, a man's hand. Just the edge of a watch. "Was this the same year?" he began. I nodded. That was 2 weeks before the hospital visit. He stared at the photo longer than he should have. "I look so happy," he whispered. "You were," I said. "For moments at a time, you really were." He shut the album. "That's what's so hard," he said. "You made life beautiful even when it wasn't. That's what mothers do." That night, I found something on my porch. A single sheet of paper, folded once, no envelope. Typed, "No return address. Tell your son to stop asking questions. Some truths are better buried. You should have stayed gone." No signature. Just dread. I sat on the porch steps with the letter in my lap, the darkness pressing in around me like a warning. This wasn't about Ethan anymore. Someone else didn't want the truth getting out. Someone who had been there back then. Someone who still remembered. And I had a gut-deep feeling that Ethan's search for clarity was about to cost us both a lot more than peace. I remember the sound. Not the sound of fists, not yelling, but the silence afterward. That awful charged stillness after Ethan punched a hole in the hallway wall. He was 15. Just back from school, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. I'd asked him to hand over his phone. He'd failed a math quiz and had mouthed off to a teacher. Nothing new, really. But that day, something in his face snapped. I reached out, fingers outstretched, not to grab, just to calm him. And he slammed his fist into the drywall. Hard. It was too fast to stop, too sharp to misinterpret. The sound of knuckles against plaster, the thud, the puff of white dust. He stared at the hole like he didn't recognize what he'd done. Neither did I. He turned to me, face red, breathing heavy. I thought he might cry. I prayed he would. Crying I could handle. But instead, he walked to his room, shut the door, and didn't come out until morning. The wall stayed broken for 3 months. I didn't fix it. It felt like a warning bell. Something real. Something I could finally point to and say, "This is where it began." I never forgot that moment. And now, almost 10 years later, with threats on my porch and Ethan knee-deep in the truth about his father, I kept seeing that same expression flicker across his face. Like a battle was happening behind his eyes. Like he couldn't decide who he was supposed to be anymore. He didn't know it, but I'd saved the piece of drywall with his knuckle mark. I'd tucked it in a storage bin buried beneath boxes of his childhood artwork, like I was preserving evidence of a fault line in the foundation. Now I was starting to think I should have paid more attention to it then. After the note arrived, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I didn't tell Ethan. He'd already become a bloodhound for history. I didn't want to feed that fire with new threats. But he sensed something. On the 3rd morning, he caught me standing in the living room, staring at the front door like it might attack. "You okay?" he asked, holding his coffee like a peace offering. "I'm fine," I lied. He didn't believe me. "Did something happen?" I opened my mouth, closed it again. "Then," I told him. I showed him the note. He read it slowly 3 times, jaw clenched. "Someone knows you're digging," I said softly, "and they don't like it." He turned the paper over as if he could summon fingerprints. "Do you think it was Uncle Darren?" he asked. "I don't know. But someone from back then is watching." He tossed the note onto the coffee table and exhaled sharply. "They're scared," he said. "Of what?" "That I might learn something that makes me dangerous." I looked at him carefully. "And are you?" He looked back. That long, searching stare, the kind only a son can give his mother. "I don't want to be," he finally said. That afternoon he left. Said he needed air. I didn't ask where he was going. But hours passed. Then evening. Then dusk. No messages, no keys jingling in the door, no footsteps upstairs. The anxiety built in my throat like a slow drip. And just as the sun started to slip below the trees, the doorbell rang. I froze, then walked slowly to the door. I didn't recognize the man on the porch. Tall, late 50s, thinning hair, a faded tattoo on his forearm. He held an envelope. "You're Lorraine Whitman?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "Ethan said you'd understand." Before I could ask anything else, he turned and walked away. Inside the envelope, 3 photographs and a single sheet of paper. The photographs were of my husband, from 27 years ago. One of them showed him standing outside a trailer holding a little girl I didn't recognize. On the back in Ethan's handwriting, I met her. Her name is April. She's my half-sister. I dropped into the nearest chair. April. Her name had appeared once buried deep in my husband's old court file, a possible previous domestic dispute connected to a woman named Karen Langford. No charges filed. The case resolved privately. I'd never dug deeper. I was too consumed with surviving my own war. But now Ethan had found her and brought her into the light. When he finally returned, it was after midnight. "I was waiting. I didn't want you to find out that way," he said as soon as he saw me. "You tracked her down." He nodded. "I drove 2 hours. Found the address in the old court file. She didn't know about me. And she looks just like him." My stomach twisted. "But she doesn't speak like him. She speaks like someone who got free. Just barely." I said nothing. My hands were folded too tightly. She said he never claimed her, never paid a dime. But she remembers things, bad things, things that made her hate mirrors for years. He paused. His voice cracked. "She told me that she thought maybe she was cursed, that everything she touched turned to violence." He looked at me, and I told her. I understood. I reached for his hand. "She wants to meet you," he said. I flinched. "Why?" "Because she remembers you, from the courthouse. Said you looked like a woman who'd seen the devil up close." I closed my eyes. "I didn't know how much of him I'd carried," Ethan whispered, "until I saw what he left behind in someone else." That night, we didn't sleep. We sat at the kitchen table going through every folder, every scrap of the past. The police reports, the cassette tapes, the journal entries. Ethan didn't ask for more. He just listened. And somewhere between 2 a.m. and sunrise, he reached across the table and said, "I forgive you." I broke, not because I needed forgiveness to survive, but because I finally knew he saw me again. Not just the gatekeeper of secrets, not just the woman who lied, but his mother, wounded, human, trying every day to make sure he'd never become the man who haunted our walls. I didn't plan to see Dr. Leyland again. She was the court-appointed trauma therapist who helped me navigate the legal maze after I left Ethan's father. A thin woman with eyes like cracked glass, sharp, observant, but always one step away from shattering herself. She hadn't just heard my pain. She'd witnessed it one session at a time. It had been over 20 years. But after Ethan handed me the letter from the man on the porch after the threats started appearing, I knew I had to talk to someone who remembered everything. Someone who wouldn't question whether I was spiraling. Someone who knew how deep this could go. The waiting room hadn't changed. Still smelled like peppermint tea and plastic binders. Still played that same faux classical music that tried to be soothing, but only made my nerves hum louder. When she stepped into the hallway and saw me, Dr. Leyland didn't speak right away. She just tilted her head and nodded once. A quiet recognition. The past doesn't always scream. Sometimes it nods politely. "I wasn't sure I'd ever see you again," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't either." "Your file is still in the archive," she said with a tight smile. "I had to dust it off. I think the past just did that for both of us." She folded her hands in her lap. "Tell me." So I did. I told her everything: Ethan's discoveries, the slashed tires, the note on the porch, his trip to meet April, his rage, his tenderness, his questions. When I finished, she didn't look surprised. She just sighed and said, "It was only a matter of time." What was? That he would start chasing the truth. "You kept it from him for years, Lorraine. But children always circle back. Always." "I know that now," I said. "I thought I was protecting him." "You were," she said. But protection has a half-life. Eventually, it starts to decay. She got up, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled out a manila folder from the bottom shelf. "I want to show you something," she said. It was my old case file, notes scribbled in her looping handwriting, session transcripts, my own quotes word for word. One page was marked with a yellow sticky note, Session 7, July 12, 1999. She handed it to me. He slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. I thought he'd finally go too far. But then he looked at me and said, "You'll never take him from me." I read the line slowly, then read it again. I barely remember saying that. I whispered. "I remember," she said, "because you were shaking when you did." Your voice was barely a whisper. I looked up. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think he meant more than just Ethan." My heart stopped. "You think he meant someone else?" "I've reviewed that session a dozen times since you called," she said. "There's something in your husband's behavior back then, something that hinted at more than just control. I think he believed he was protecting something, or someone." "You think there's another child?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Dr. Leyland didn't answer right away, but the way she looked at me told me she'd asked herself the same thing. "I think," she said, "there may be more history than you've been allowed to remember." The room suddenly felt colder. "Do you remember ever blacking out?" she asked. I blinked. "What?" "Periods where you lost time, sudden confusion, anything that felt fragmented." I tried to laugh, but it came out as a croak. "I lived with a man who choked me in my sleep." Of course I lost time. "But were there specific gaps?" she asked gently. "Times you couldn't account for." I was about to shake my head when it hit me. A week. 1 week after I gave birth to Ethan. I had no memory of that week. I remembered the hospital vaguely. I remembered a nurse with a high laugh and flowers on the bedside table. But I didn't remember leaving. I didn't remember coming home. I didn't even remember Ethan's first bath. My throat tightened. "There's a hole," I whispered. Dr. Leyland nodded. "That week it's gone," I said. "I don't know if I ever noticed before, but now." She leaned forward. "Lorraine, listen to me. If there's any part of your history that's missing, it may be time to face the possibility that the threat isn't just about what you know, but what you've forgotten." Goosebumps covered my arms. "What do I do?" I asked. She handed me a slip of paper. "A name, a clinic, a trauma specialist," she said. "Not for therapy, for recovery. Memory work. Someone who specializes in reconstructive recall." "I thought that kind of thing was unreliable," I said. "It is," she said, "unless it's trauma-based. And trust me, Lorraine, your brain's been protecting you. But it can't do that forever." I clutched the paper like it was a lifeline. "Be careful," she added. "If someone's threatening you now, it means they think you're close to something. Closer than you realize." When I got home, Ethan was in the backyard. He was burning something in the fire pit. I stood at the screen door and watched him for a moment. The flames flickered on his face, casting shadows over his cheekbones, the dark hollows beneath his eyes. He looked older. He looked like someone who had seen ghosts and refused to run. "What are you burning?" I asked, stepping outside. He turned. "The picture. Of him." "No. Of me. At 6. The one where I'm wearing his jacket." I stepped closer. "Why that one?" "Because I don't want to remember myself as someone wrapped in his skin." The paper curled, blackened, and vanished in the fire. "Good," I said. "Some things deserve to be ashes." He nodded, then looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. I held up the slip of paper. "I think I'm about to find out." And for the first time, I saw something in Ethan's eyes I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. Flickering. Fragile. But there. And it felt like maybe this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The mind is a master of protection. It locks doors when we don't ask it to. It builds walls around memories we can't bear to see. But every locked room holds air, and eventually, we have to breathe it. That's what Dr. Martin explained to me the first day I sat in his office. The trauma specialist. Recommended by Dr. Leyland. He was kind, careful. Not too soft. Just aware. the way someone has to be when handling the mind like a fragile artifact. He explained the process-guided memory recall using subtle therapeutic triggers, trauma-focused EMDR visual mapping. He told me it might feel like swimming through mud, that my body might remember before my mind did. And then he asked, "Is there a period of your life you suspect is missing?" I nodded. Right after I gave birth to my son, I said, "There's a week that's just gone." He scribbled something, looked up. "And now something in your present is pressing against that absence." "Yes," I said. "My son has been unraveling a story, and it's pulling me with him." He smiled faintly. "That's how it works. Children reopen doors their parents believed were sealed." The first session didn't go deep. He guided me through breathing, talked about sensory cues, music, smells, textures. Then he asked me what I did remember. I told him. The hospital room, the white tulips from a nurse named Jen, a man with a deep voice reading a Bible outside my door. Then, nothing. No discharge, no car ride home, no nursery. Just blankness, like someone had stolen a chapter and replaced it with static. Dr. Martin leaned in. "When you hold your son now, how does your body react?" I was startled. "React?" "Yes. Does your chest tighten? Do you feel warmth? Numbness? Fear?" I closed my eyes. Thought of Ethan's arms wrapped around me when he was 5, when he was 15, when he just handed me the fire-lit photo. "I feel responsibility," I said. "Wait." He nodded. "You might be carrying more than you think." Back home, I started noticing things. The birth records had discrepancies. Ethan's discharge paperwork from the hospital was dated 4 days later than what I remembered. There was a missing pediatrician record, something a nurse had scribbled in his file. "Patient transferred temporarily. Refer to Langdon notes." Langdon. I never remembered seeing that name before. I called the hospital. The woman on the other end said the Langdon wing was the psychiatric observation unit. My heart froze. I checked my own medical files from that year, requested them under a different name just to avoid red flags. And there it was. A 1-week observation stay. Under Lorraine Westman, a misspelled version of my married name. The reason for admittance: postpartum dissociation. Observed agitation. Transferred from maternity for evaluation. I'd been held. I didn't remember. Not a second of it. I told Ethan that night. He sat at the edge of the kitchen table, his fingers drumming against the wood. "You were in psych observation?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "For a week. They called it dissociation. I never even knew." He leaned back, as if the information had knocked the wind out of him. "Do you remember why?" "No, just blackness." He was silent for a long time. Then, "I found a record too," he said. "From a family friend. Someone I tracked down from Dad's side." My blood chilled. "She said she remembered hearing something," he continued. "That there was a woman, young, terrified, who showed up at their door one night screaming that she'd been drugged, that she had a baby, but didn't remember having it." I stared at him. "She said your face was like marble. No emotion, just panic." My hands trembled. "Why would I go to them?" "I don't think you meant to," he said. "I think maybe you ran from the hospital, or from what they were doing to you." The second memory session was harder. Dr. Martin played soft music from the time. He asked me to hold a newborn-sized weight in my arms, to close my eyes and imagine the room. I saw flashes, not of Ethan, of a needle, a man's voice whispering something about calm. I heard myself crying, but not aloud. Internally, a scream my throat never released. Then, just as I thought I'd broken through, everything vanished again. Dr. Martin brought me back, told me it was progress. That fear often slams the door right when it's about to open. But I left that session with something burning in my gut. I hadn't been treated. I'd been silenced. That night, I received another note, this time tucked beneath my windshield wiper. A single sentence: "Not everything you forgot was yours to remember." My knees buckled. Ethan found me on the porch, the note in my shaking hands. "This is escalating," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I think someone's watching us." "Who would go this far?" I asked. "Why?" He looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize. "Because it wasn't fear. It was certainty. I think someone in Dad's family is hiding something, and I think you were drugged to forget it. The next morning, I received a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, cracked, nervous. Lorraine, I knew you once. Back when you were in Langdon. You don't know me, but I remember you. You tried to tell me something, and they pulled you away. Call me back. Please. Before someone else erases it again. Her name was Elise. I found her number written out on the voicemail transcript and called back before I could change my mind. The phone rang 4 times. 5. Then, Lorraine. The voice was thin but urgent, like it had been waiting decades to be heard. Yes, I said. I got your message. Silence. Then a slow exhale. I didn't think you'd call, she said. People usually don't. I wasn't sure how to respond. You said we met at Langdon. Yes, she replied. We were in the same unit. You arrived during the night. You were wild, shaking, talking to yourself. I clenched the phone tighter. I don't remember. I know, she said gently. They gave you something. After your first hour, they sedated you. You were out cold for days. What did I say before they sedated me? She hesitated. You screamed a name. Over and over. I closed my eyes. My husband's. No, she whispered. A different one. A woman's. My stomach dropped. What name? Angela? I froze. Angela. The name rang like a bell I couldn't locate. You were sobbing, Lorraine, saying she took him and I let her. Over and over. My hands trembled. Then Elise continued. You said something that chilled me. What? He wasn't supposed to go to her. He was mine. I sat down slowly, the floor tilting under my feet. Do you remember any of this? Elise asked softly. No, I said. Nothing. A pause. You looked terrified, she whispered. Like a woman who'd lost more than she could say. I hung up the phone and walked to the bathroom. Looked at myself in the mirror. Angela. Why would I scream that name? I didn't know an Angela. Not from that time. Not from my past. And he who had, I meant Ethan. No, Ethan had been with me. Unless the impossible was true. Unless there had been someone else. I dug out the notebook I had started keeping after my sessions with Dr. Martin. Notes, images, fragments. And there in the corner of one page I had scrawled something without thinking. Red dress, nursery, blood on the tile. I stared at the words like they'd been written by someone else. What red dress? What nursery? The pieces didn't fit. But the feeling they stirred, that queasy, skin-crawling sensation that something was wrong, that was real. I called Dr. Martin. Come in tomorrow, he said. No delay. This time the session was deeper. He used a technique he called sensory anchoring. He handed me a worn baby blanket, faded blue, and asked me to close my eyes. He dimmed the lights, played soft breathing sounds in the background. Just speak, he said, even if it makes no sense. I began. I'm in a room. There's a humming sound. Medical. Sterile. What do you see? He asked. White tiles, a crib, one crib, and a woman in red. I can't see her face. She's turning away. She has something in her arms. I started to cry. She's walking out. She's taking something. What? I paused. Then, without thinking, my baby. Dr. Martin's voice was soft. Which baby? My mouth opened, but no sound came. When I returned home, I found Ethan waiting. He was pale, a folder in his hands. What is it? I asked. I think I found her. I stepped back. Who? Angela, from the voicemail. My mouth went dry. She was a nurse at Langdon, worked in psych observation, fired in 1999 after a quiet investigation. No charges. For what? He handed me the folder. Inside, an old staff photo, grainy. Angela was standing third from the left. Red hair. Blank stare. She had a breakdown, Ethan said. But before that, she worked directly with postpartum patients, including you. I sat down. There's more, he said. He handed me a second document. A birth certificate, but not mine. Another child, born the same week as Ethan. Mother not disclosed. Father unknown. Child male. Hospital St. Margaret's Maternity now merged with Langdon. I looked at the name. It had been redacted, but Ethan had traced the file through the hospital database using a friend from a university data team. They sealed this record, he said. The day you were admitted to Langdon. My skin turned cold. I think you had twins, he said. And they took one. I couldn't breathe. That's why you screamed. That's what Angela took. I pressed my hand over my heart, and suddenly it all made sense. The week I lost. The unshakable feeling something had always been missing. Not just memory, a child. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. Then Ethan stood. I have to find out who he is, he said. If he's alive, if he knows, if he's even... He couldn't finish the sentence. I whispered, "Are you sure you want to go down that road?" He looked back at me. "You always say the truth can hurt," he said. "But this lie hurts more." And I knew right then that nothing would stop him. It began with a blurry photo. A grainy, overexposed image Ethan had pulled from a yearbook archive using the name of a foster care home that Angela, the red-haired nurse, had once been affiliated with. There, in a corner of the 2016 staff group shot, stood a young man, 17, maybe 18, tall, narrow shoulders, brown eyes. Something unreadable in his posture, guarded but aching. Ethan had circled him in red ink. "I think this is him," he'd written underneath. My breath caught. It felt impossible. Not just the possibility that this young man, this boy I had never seen, was mine, but that my son had gone looking for him, without asking, without warning. "His name is Michael," Ethan said the next day. "He aged out of the system at 19, bounced between homes before that. No adopted parents, no listed next of kin." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, records, behavioral assessments, medical files, foster transfer logs, most of it redacted or incomplete. "Where is he now?" I asked, voice trembling. "Working part-time at a bike repair shop in a town 2 hours away. Living in a tiny rented room above the garage." I stared at Ethan. "You found all this? How?" He hesitated. "A friend from college works in data recovery. He shouldn't have helped me, but I had to know." I exhaled. My hands shook as I picked up the photo. Michael, he looked like me. Not exactly, but the chin, the brow line, the eyes that pulled downward at the corners like they were always waiting for something bad to happen. "Have you met him?" I whispered. Ethan shook his head. "No, but I watched him from the shop across the street. He's quiet, keeps to himself." "You watched him?" I had to be sure before I said anything. I didn't want to blow up his life. I stared at my son, my first son, and felt a deep ache in my chest. "This could destroy everything," I said softly. "Or fix what was broken," he replied. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom holding that photo like it was evidence in a murder trial. Because in a way, it was. A murder of identity, of connection. Someone had taken this boy, my child, and removed him from my memory, from my arms, from every picture, from every milestone. Angela, and whoever had helped her. I thought about Elise, about what she'd said on the phone. She took him and I let her. Had I really let her? Or had I been drugged, restrained, forced into forgetting? And if so, who signed those papers? Who approved that separation? How far had this gone? And how long had the people involved kept it quiet? The next day, Ethan stood at the kitchen counter holding car keys. "I'm going," he said, "to see him." I nodded. "I'm coming with you." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "No," I said, "but I'm going anyway." The town was smaller than I expected. Dusty, tired, like it had stopped trying to impress visitors years ago. We parked across the street from the bike repair shop. There was a small apartment sign out back, "Room for rent, ask inside." Ethan pointed. "That's where he lives." The world tilted beneath my feet. I got out of the car, walked slowly toward the shop. My knees felt brittle. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Inside, the place smelled of grease and metal and cold air. And then I saw him. Bent over a bike frame, hands black with oil. "Michael." He looked up when the bell rang. His eyes locked with mine. Something flickered in them, something unspoken, like a door swinging open behind the irises. "Can I help you?" he asked. I stepped forward. Ethan hovered behind me. I think you might be my son," I said. The shop went silent. Michael stared, then laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp, hollow. "I've heard a lot of things," he said, "but that's a new one." "I was at Langdon," I said quickly. "The year you were born. Your birth record was sealed. You were removed without consent." He set down the wrench slowly, wiped his hands on a rag. Still didn't move closer. "Lady, I don't know you," he said, "and I'm not interested in playing fantasy games." Ethan stepped forward. "We have DNA from the hospital." Michael looked at him. "You his lawyer or something?" "No, I'm your brother." The silence cracked like thunder. Michael's face drained of color. "No," he said. "No, that's not possible." "I thought so too," Ethan said, "until I found your file." Michael turned to me, eyes burning. "If this is true, if this is real, why now? Why did you wait 24 years? "Because I didn't know," I said, voice breaking. "They made me forget. I was sedated, monitored. I screamed your name, and then it was gone." He stared at me for a long time, then walked to the back door. "I don't want this," he said, not turning around. "Whatever this is, I don't want it." And then he was gone. Back in the car, Ethan gripped the steering wheel hard. "I shouldn't have brought you," he said. "No," I said. "You did the right thing." He looked at me, eyes moist. "You think he'll ever believe us?" "I don't know," I whispered. "But he's alive. And that's more than I could have hoped for." Ethan stared ahead. "Do we try again?" "Yes," I said, but gently. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside, "If I take the test and it confirms this, you better be ready to explain why I grew up alone." Signed M. The DNA kit arrived by overnight delivery. Ethan had ordered 2, one for Michael, one for himself. He wanted to be the control. He packed it carefully in a box with a note tucked inside written in my handwriting. "This doesn't change the past, but it might open the future. I won't ask for anything more than the truth." Lorraine. We mailed it to the bike shop's P.O. box, the same place Michael had signed the letter from. No return address, no pressure, just the hope that he would open it and choose to know. Waiting was like standing in the middle of a minefield, afraid to move in any direction. For 5 days nothing came, no call, no letter. Then a week later, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. His face was pale, hands shaking. "He did it," he said. "He took the test." My heart stopped, and he held out his phone. A screenshot. The results had been shared to a shared login account Ethan had set up through the testing site. The names were there. The match percentage. Michael, 99.98% probability of full biological sibling. And below that, parent match Lorraine Whitman, 99.99%. I stared at the screen. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I had birthed 2 sons, and one of them had been taken from me. Not lost, stolen. The paper didn't just confirm biology, it confirmed betrayal. I sat down at the kitchen table where Ethan and I had once burned photos, where we'd opened letters, where we'd mourned truth. He sat across from me, said nothing. Then softly, "You were right." I didn't look at him. "I never wanted to be right," I whispered. "I would have given anything to be wrong." He slid a second folder across the table. "I kept digging," he said. Inside, printed court documents, redacted medical orders, old financial records. "Angela wasn't working alone," Ethan said. "She was part of a quietly funded psychiatric initiative. They claimed to resettle newborns born under extreme trauma. But it was a cover. A cover for what? For removing babies from mothers deemed psychologically unfit, even if temporarily." Langdon was one of 3 hospitals running the trial. "And Michael," I whispered. He nodded. "He was the proof. Your trauma made you the perfect target. They didn't want you unfit forever, just long enough to take him." I covered my mouth. "They erased your consent, forged the paperwork, and the state looked the other way." My body went cold. "And my husband?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. "I think he knew." I looked up. "He signed something, didn't he?" "Yes. An order granting temporary guardianship to the hospital in the event you were deemed unstable. It was enough. They didn't need your signature. The tears didn't fall. Not yet. I was too far beneath them to let them rise. The next day, a letter arrived. Handwritten again. Neat. Controlled. Michael's handwriting. The paper says we're bound. But that doesn't explain the ache. The years no one filled. The arms I thought would never reach for me. I need to see your face. I need to know what was taken. M. It was an invitation. Not of forgiveness, not of reunion, but of truth. Aoife, we met in a park an hour from his town. Ethan stayed in the car. Michael sat on a bench, a duffel bag at his feet. When he looked up, I didn't see my face in his. I saw my absence. The spaces where lullabies should have lived. The gap where stories and scraped knees and holiday photos should have been. I sat beside him. He didn't speak right away. Then I thought you'd be taller. I smiled faintly. I used to be. He looked down. Why didn't you remember me? They made me forget. He nodded. I know that now. Doesn't make it hurt less. I know. He looked at me finally. Did you love me? I broke. I reached into my bag, pulled out the one thing I had found in the hospital records, a birth bracelet with 2 tags. One for Ethan. One marked Baby W. M. They labeled you, but they never let me name you. His throat tightened. He took the bracelet gently like it might break. You were born on a Thursday, I said. It rained that day. I remember the sound. He closed his eyes. I don't know if I can be your son, he said. But maybe I can be someone you come to know. I nodded, tears blurring the world. That's all I want. When we got home, Ethan asked me how it went. He's everything I feared, I said. And everything I hoped. He nodded. We'll go slow, I said. If he wants. He will, Ethan replied. We both did. I turned toward him. You saved him, I said. You didn't have to. I didn't do it for him, he said. I did it for you. Because I've seen what forgetting did to you. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not healed, not yet, but whole. She showed up on a Tuesday. No call, no warning. Just the soft knock of guilt on my front door. When I opened it, I recognized her instantly. The red hair had gone gray at the roots. Her eyes were smaller now, like they'd spent years shrinking away from what they'd seen. But her presence still sharp enough to cut through the air. Lorraine, she said, like we were old friends. Like she hadn't stolen a lifetime from me. I stood motionless. May I come in? She asked. I didn't answer. I stepped back. That was enough. She walked into the kitchen like she remembered it, and sat in the same chair where Ethan once burned a photograph. I stood across from her. No coffee, no kindness. Just silence. She looked around like she was hunting for memories. You kept the wallpaper, she said. I didn't speak. She folded her hands on the table. They were trembling. I assume you know by now, she said. About the boy. I nodded. His name is Michael. She flinched. So you named him? I would have. If I'd been allowed. She winced again, this time deeper. I watched her closely. I wanted to see where she would lie, where she would flinch, where she would try to spin the past into a kindness. You remember more now, she asked. I remember screaming, I said. I remember you taking him. She stared at her hands. I didn't want to do it. You did it anyway. She looked up, her voice cracking. I was told you were unstable, that he needed protection, that you had hurt the first one. I froze. What? They said you'd harmed your first son, that you weren't fit for a second. I leaned forward. Who told you that? She shook her head. The attending, the psychiatric team. They gave me signed papers. From your husband. From a judge. You knew he was lying. I didn't know anything. Her voice broke. I was 27, fresh out of grad school. I was trying to make a difference. You made a scar, I said. Not a difference. She started to cry. But I didn't reach for her. I let her sob. Let her shake. Let her drown in the same cold silence she had left me in for 24 years. I tried to check on him, she whispered. Michael. I followed his file until they moved him. When I asked questions, they fired me. Good. She looked up, startled. I hope you never slept a peaceful night after that, I said. I didn't. I nodded. Then we're even. She wiped her face. Why did you let me in? I needed to see your face, I said. To know the devil had a name. Angela stood slowly. I didn't come for forgiveness. I didn't offer it. She opened her purse and slid something across the table. A cassette tape. Old. Labeled in red ink. Will. Consent recording. Transfer order. 1999. My breath caught. You kept it. They made a copy for records. I stole it before they wiped my credentials. Why give it to me now? Because no matter what I believed then, I know what I did now. And it's time you get to hear the truth. That night, Ethan and I sat in the living room and played the tape. The machine crackled. A male voice. The hospital administrator. Then my husband's voice. Calm. Calculated. She won't remember. I've made sure of that. You have my signature. Take the second one. She'll never know. Then silence. Then my voice. Soft, slurred. Don't take him, please don't take him. Followed by sobbing. Then a nurse Angela saying, she doesn't even know which one is which. And then end of tape. I turned it off. Ethan was stone-faced. So he knew, he said. Yes, I whispered. He chose to erase a child. He didn't just erase him, I said. He sold him. We sat there in silence. Then Ethan said, I want to find out what else he did. Be careful, I said. The more you find, the heavier it gets. He looked at me. I can carry it. I looked away. I thought that too. Angela never came back. But the past she represented, it no longer haunted the corners of my mind. It sat plainly in front of me now, named, taped, witnessed. And for the first time in decades, I stopped blaming myself for forgetting, because now I remembered everything. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address, no stamps, just my name typed neatly in the center. Inside, folded twice, was a letter, handwritten. I knew the handwriting. Jacob Whitman, my late husband's younger brother. We hadn't spoken in over 20 years. Not since the funeral. Not since he stood at the edge of the church foyer, avoiding my eyes like I carried a curse. But now suddenly he had something to say. Lorraine, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means the past has found you. I always wondered how long it would take. Your husband was a man who liked secrets, but even more than that, he liked making sure others carried the burden for him. I should have said something sooner. I almost did. But fear is a coward's crutch, and I leaned on it too long. I stopped reading. My hands were sweating. I could feel Ethan watching me from across the kitchen. What is it, he asked? His brother, I said. He knew. Knew what? I didn't answer. I kept reading. In 1999, a few months before Michael was born, your husband came to me with a folder. He said he needed a favor, that you'd been slipping. He claimed you were dangerous, that the hospital had deemed you unfit, that there was a second child, and this part I'll never forget. He said, one is enough for her. She doesn't need to ruin two. I thought he was talking about custody, divorce. I didn't realize he meant erasure. He had me sign as a witness to a court petition, told me it was procedural. I didn't read it closely. I was his brother. I trusted him. I felt the bile rise in my throat. He signed it, I whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. Jacob. I nodded. He helped cover it, but the letter wasn't finished. When I found out what had happened, that you'd been committed briefly and that only one child had come home, I started asking questions. He warned me to stop. Said if I didn't, he'd have me investigated for financial fraud. And the worst part? It wasn't an empty threat. He had dirt on me. Years ago, I'd co-signed a false document for him during a business deal. He held onto it like a weapon. So I shut up. I told myself you'd heal. That maybe it was for the best. That you never asked. So maybe you didn't know. But I saw you, Lorraine. I saw the way you walked at the funeral, like your soul had been amputated. I lowered the letter, took a breath. He saw it, I said. Ethan nodded, eyes stormy. He watched you suffer. And did nothing. I think he wants to make it right, I said. Ethan scoffed. Now. I kept reading. I kept one copy of the petition. Hidden. in case one day I had the guts to send it. I've enclosed it here. Do with it what you will. If you're wondering why now, I was diagnosed with cancer 2 months ago. Stage 4. I didn't want to leave this world without giving you back your voice. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I hope someday you can forgive a coward. Folded inside the envelope was a second page, a scanned petition. Petition for emergency guardianship. Child W2. Michael Whitman filed. April 1999. Signed by my husband. Witness Jacob Whitman. Order approved by Judge Alan D. Coates. The same judge later censured for ethics violations. I stared at the signature. Proof. Real legal damning proof. I turned to Ethan. We have what we need. To do what? Expose this. Legally, publicly, all of it. He was silent. Then, what if Michael doesn't want that? I paused. He might not, I said. But if he ever does, this is the key. We drove to Michael's town that weekend. I asked to meet him privately. Just the two of us. We sat on a park bench again under the same gray sky. I handed him the letter. He read it in silence. Didn't cry. Didn't flinch. When he finished, he folded it slowly. So it wasn't just one person, he said. No, it was a system. Yes. He stared at the ground. I'm not angry the way I thought I'd be. No. He shook his head. I'm empty. Like I've been yelling into a canyon my whole life, and now I finally heard the echo. I nodded. What do you want to do? I don't know yet, he said. But I know this. You didn't abandon me. No, I said. I tried to hold on to you. But they took you from my arms before I ever got the chance. He looked at me. Then maybe now we start from there. That night, I sat in my living room alone. The petition on the table, the letter beside it, the cassette still tucked into its plastic sleeve. 24 years, one lie, 2 sons, and a mother finally standing where truth had always waited for her in the shadows with open arms. My name is Lorraine Whitman, and for 24 years I believed I was broken. Not because of age or exhaustion, but because there was a sound in me I could never name, like a lullaby I'd forgotten how to hum. Now I know that sound was Michael's cry, the one I wasn't allowed to answer. The silence I carried wasn't just a wound. It was a warning that my truth had been buried, drugged, signed away by the man who once promised to protect me, by the people who swore to heal me, by a system that stamped my motherhood unstable because I grieved too loudly. But this is what they never counted on, that I would rise, that I would remember, that I would speak. Ethan and Michael came to dinner last Sunday. It was quiet at first. They sat on opposite sides of the table like distant planets. But then Michael said, "You're the one who played piano, right?" And Ethan nodded. "Yeah." "Why, I used to hear it in my head," Michael said. "Always thought it was imagined." Ethan looked down. "Mom played when she was pregnant." "Maybe I remember that," Michael said softly. That was the first time they smiled at each other. Later, Michael asked to see the baby books, the ones I kept, the ones with only half the photos, half the memories. "I don't have pictures of you as a baby," I told him, "but I have something else." I handed him the bracelet, his tiny birth ID, still marked with the wrong name. He held it like something holy. "I was there," he whispered. "Always," I said, "even when I didn't know how to say your name." The petition was submitted to a journalist last week, anonymously. Ethan made sure it went to someone who knew how to protect sources. The story's been picked up. A series, they said, on erased mothers, stolen children, on psychiatric manipulation dressed up as public service. I don't want fame or revenge, but I do want the world to know. You can drug a woman. You can silence her. You can even convince her she's dangerous. But truth waits, and when it returns, it doesn't whisper. It roars. Sometimes I look at my sons and wonder, what would our life have looked like if I'd been given both of them from the start? If no one had taken the right to hold them both at once? But then I think, maybe this is the beginning. A beginning that starts not with innocence, but with truth. And that is stronger. Because now they know me not as the broken woman in the corner, but as the mother who crawled through silence, dug through shadows, and found them both. So to you listening, maybe you've been told you're too emotional, too confused, too fragile to remember, too unstable to know what's real. But hear me, if your silence was stolen from you, then your voice is still waiting. Go find it, and never hand it over again. This is my story. It's not clean, it's not gentle, but it's mine. And now finally it's whole.